using a very small example, I will try to show you how to go about debugging, and how to reason as we are debugging code. So how we can do that? It's a very short example in Python. You don't have to know Python for this. Just if you understand logic, it would be fine. So I will just share my screen. Okay. So is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So before I start, I just want to make an analogy. Suppose imagine your code base as this, So and here you sort of break your code in between, and then you inspect this piece of code whether or not the error lies here. If there are certain errors that lie in the second section of the code, then you can correct it, and then you can move on to the first section. So this way, it's often called as the binary approach to debugging, in which you sort of divide your code into half, and then understand the problem and further divide based on, and then keep on correcting the errors. So here we will sort of follow that same approach. And so here is the code. It's there are two functions. This checks if it's the number is palindrome or not, and here you put the input and the final result is obtained. So we will try to sort of there are certain bugs with this program, and we will try to understand how we can go about correcting it. So before we start, let us try to run it and see what it gives us. So we try to run it, and so the final answer is the function that takes n, and n is the string you put. So here I have entered a string of 5. So let us see what it returns. So we enter first input as a. Let's put second input as a again. I change the third input, and fourth is here, and fifth is a. So when you see it looks like a palindrome, and when I enter, so the function does say it's a palindrome. Okay, so this case is justified, but let me give another input here just for the sake of it. So let's say a, and I enter b, c, d, and e. So here again it is saying it's a palindrome. So definitely, as you can see, which type of error is this?
Logical error.
Which error?
Logical.
Logical, yeah. Semantic error, logic error. So as you can see, the program is running fine, but there are, it's not returning the right output. So whenever you notice something like this, you start with a small input. So let's say, what would be the smallest input to this function if you want to check the palindrome?
1.
Okay. So let us try to see it for 1. So if I enter this, sorry. So for 1, it is
It's always a palindrome.
so for 1 it is showing it's a palindrome. Next we move on to a second level input. So let's say 2. And if we try to run it again, so if I enter A and then I'm entering B, so again it is showing that it's a palindrome. So let us try to debug it for an input of 2, and then we'll slowly try to build up. Is that okay? Is it clear till now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now let's go back to the function final answer, and let us try to print. So let us actually see what is going on in this particular thing. So here you have sort of entered print result, and you will, so because this result is entering into the ispal function, and then it is telling if it's a palindrome or not. So we try to check first of all what is being entered into this result. So let us try to run again, and here I enter a, and then B. So what do you see here? What should have been the input and what is the final string that is coming?
It has to be A comma B, but it's removed and B
Yeah.
because they're overriding the result.
So what needs to change here?
Line
That
number
result
20 to line number 18.
Line number?
20 to 18.
Okay. So, and why is it so? The reason? Yeah.
It gets initialized every time, so it gets to single letter every time. So a single letter is always a palindrome. That's why it's giving true always.
Okay. So Parth and Garvit also in the chat have mentioned that it should be initialized outside the loop. So let us try to move it outside of the loop. Okay. Now we try to run again. So I entered the input A and input B. Okay. So at least one of the things is resolved now. Our input is coming correctly, but still it is showing that it's a palindrome. So here we have at least solved the input error, and because our print function has served its purpose, so we remove it so that we don't clutter our code, and this is how our code looks now. Is it clear till here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so good. Here you have been able to identify, and if we try to just verify once again, so again we could see that the input is fine, but if you want me to keep the input, so I will keep it just for your reference, and I try to run it again. So the input is fine, but it's not a palindrome. So here we have cleared everything, and now as a result we move on to this place. So this function checks whether or not the string is a palindrome or not. So what do you suggest? What should be the first thing that stands out here? So X is the input. So okay, so here let us try to print temp. Okay.
Reverse is a function.
So temp is obtaining the value of X, and here we are saying temp dot reverse. So if I try to print temp here again, I remove it from here. So ideally, let us see what it is providing us.
Function object.
So this is our result string, and this is the X string after reverse. But what is happening here? It's not reversed. What is the reason here?
String dot reverse is a function, not a what is it? Parameter or something. Not a
Okay.
number variable. It has to be called.
So basically, the function has not been invoked. So
Yes.
if I try to do this, and then let me see it again. So now it is reversed. Okay. This is this is for print result, and here it is reversed, but still again it is showing it's a palindrome. Now what is the problem here?
and after reversing the temp, we are not storing it in like temp variable. We are just reversing it.
But we are reversing it, but it is actually being updated in the temp, because when we print temp, it is actually storing it. So we don't really need to pass it on, because it is already happening. So what is the trouble here?
Uh, Maybe equal to 7 is print both x and temp.
So okay, let me give you a hint. Let me try to print X also here. Let me remove result from here so that you don't get confused. So we reverse temp, but what is happening? A is also reversing. But A is actually X is actually A comma B, and when I'm passing temp, when I'm storing temp into X and I'm reversing it, it's fine becoming B comma A, but X is also reversing. Now why X is also reversing when I'm reversing temp?
Because
Man,
it's
because in
less
Python it is passed to reference, not the. You are just passing on the reference, and the both variables are redirecting to the same variable,
Yeah,
and both are changing.
yeah. So what is this
temp,
called as?
temp equal to x dot com.
What is this thing called as in which both are referring to the same space? What is this thing called as? Have you ever heard of aliasing?
Yes,
Yeah.
same thing has different names.
So both of them are actually referring to the same point, and if one thing is changing, the other is also changing. So how do we prevent aliasing when we are difference between aliasing and cloning is important to remember. What is cloning?
To completely make a copy.
Creating two different objects with
Yeah.
similar attributes.
Okay, so how will I change line number 5?
X dot copy temp equal to
Can you write in the chat box?
temp is equal to x dot copy
Okay, let us see.
and invoke.
So you are saying this?
Yes,
Okay, so let us try to run it. So now it is saying it's not a palindrome. So let us check for an input of 5. So here again, so you have identified it's not a palindrome. So now we have corrected. Is there any other way of modifying line number 5? Ever seen something like this?
yes,
Hmm? So
I think
yeah, this is also used sometimes for cloning, right? So if we try to run it here, so again, it's not a palindrome. So now we have solved the bugs in the problem. So remember we used.
does it work for if I mean if is it correctly identifying palindromes?
Okay. Good question. Let us try to identify that also. So it's a palindrome. Okay.
Yes,
So
thank you.
I will share this code with all of you after the class also. So you can verify this, and in maybe in next lab session, not tomorrow's but after, I have 2 questions already for you, which are 2 programs in which you will be supposed to find the bugs and fix them. So using this example, I tried to show you briefly how to go about debugging, and after the printing statements and everything have served their purpose, you can remove them. But the idea is very simple. Go step by step, print it, and then try to understand what is going. And hopefully one thing you should have noticed, that although there were no runtime errors, there were some program errors, and that's why sometimes knowing concepts is also important, like how function invoking and making the copy, aliasing versus cloning, and initialization of the arrays. So this was a very short example using which I tried to give you a taste of debugging. So is the example clear to all of you?
Yes,
Okay. Good. So now we will move on to our lecture, and I have two problem statements planned for you. I might increase this to two more for debugging so that you can get good amount of practice also in that scenario. Okay. So now but sometimes what can happen is, sometimes you can really get stuck and you don't really understand what is the probable solution of your code. So in that case, which movie is it?
Kung Fu Panda.
Kung Fu Panda. Yes. So sometimes at times like this, we might as well remember the teacher of Panda. That most of the times when you have tried everything that you wanted to fix your code and it's still not working, you know, it's time to get away from your computer for some time so that you can lighten up your mind. And sometimes normally in my life also I've noticed that when I am really at a deadlock and dead end and not able to understand how to fix a problem, or even not able to identify an opening in the research problem, sometimes I just go for a walk and then try to think over that problem so that I have a fresh mind to come back to the problem. So sometimes taking a distance really helps. So normally, if you are stuck in a problem and you have identified everything and still, even though you have solved all the runtime errors, but semantic errors and logical errors are persisting and you're not able to arrive at a solution, then you need to get up from your system and just, go for a light walk and think at a problem again with a calm mind. Because when we are trying to push really, really, really hard, sometimes we block our own vision and understanding and we come in our own way. So that is why it is important to remember to take a break. And sometimes most of the problems can be tackled with fresher energy if we teach ourselves to keep calm. I'm saying we teach ourselves to keep calm because keeping calm is not very natural. That comes to all of us. It is something that we need to learn. Okay, with that said, so but if you're really stuck and you have went for a stroll and something and now you have figured out that you really need help, then it is not too bizarre to call someone in your team or your friends and to discuss the problem with them. And so even the best programmers get occasionally stuck. So but before you bring someone, make sure that you have exhausted all your techniques to fix the bug. And when you're explaining your problem or your program to someone else, then you should be very clear in explaining them and make sure that they have understood the problem and then they can help you. Most often it might happen that in the process of explaining the problems to them, you might arrive at the solution, or you may, while talking to them or while explaining to them, you might yourself stumble upon the solution. As Tarun had mentioned last time, something called as rubber duck debugging. So something really to that. So don't flinch from asking for support. And I can understand it becomes really difficult sometimes to ask for support, especially when we are stuck, because we often judge ourselves for not being able to solve the problem. But it's okay to ask for help. It really is. Because we then, when the error is found, then we need to sit with us and wonder, why couldn't I identify it earlier? What was going wrong? And that way, that leads you, to better understanding of the problem. All right. So debugging, much like any other science, is more of experimental in nature. It's like a detective work, but don't discount the clues that you obtain during the process. It is more like an experimental science. So, but it is not hit and trial. I must, emphasize on this, that experimental debugging should not be considered as something hit and trial, because uh, you are proceeding from clues to the source of the error and then ultimately trying to understand the problem. So remember this thing. Modern editors have inbuilt debuggers. In previous times, people really did not have debuggers, and they used to have external programs for that. But these days, debuggers are already there in the editors. But as I mentioned in yesterday's lecture, debugger is only as good as your sense of understanding of the problem or the error that the debugger is throwing. So you really need to understand the error so that you can better solve the problems. Going forward, there is something called as defensive programming. Has anyone heard of this term before?
Yes, exhausting all possibilities, like picking what is everything good, and then doing what to do with this.
Okay.
Uh, like we did in the previous example, asserting if it's a list or asserting if it's a number or something.
Yes, yes, yes. So defensive programming originates from the fact that most of the times challenging our own assumptions. So if we would not have put the assert, we would have assumed that the input is a, an expected type of input. So that is why defensive programming takes into care the worst case scenarios. It's more like defensive driving, in which you're sort of driving under the worst case scenario, imagining that other drivers are violating traffic laws. So when you know that, so you try to drive in a defensive manner. So similarly, defensive programming means developing a code such that it works correctly under the worst case scenarios from its environment. So how do you think defensive programming is related to robustness of a software? Is there any link between the two? So how is defensive programming can be contributing to the robustness of the software?
Not too sure about. Like we can check every possibilities, but someone else may find some other possibility or something.
Okay,
Uh,
so what is robustness? What makes a software robust, or what makes a code robust?
Logic and doing things in a way that whatever the input will give the output in the consistent way or something.
Yeah, so basically making sure that your program uh, will
Doesn't crash.
will not crash or will not drastically go wrong if some wrong sort of input is provided to your program. So defensive programming generally means that taking care of you know all the cases in which an input can be there. So that is why when you are actually writing sitting to write a program, pay attention to the input variables that can go into a type of function. And if the input is not what is expected, then how will your system handle that kind of exception or that kind of input? And that is what relates to defensive programming, because you must assume the worst case input to that function, inputs that are too large, too small, or that violate some property that is essential to the functioning. So your code should be able to deal with all these cases, and even though they are not expected. So can you recall of any example of this in which defensive programming could have helped in the London ambulance computer aided dispatch system? Can you recall of something similar?
Making sure that two different calls actually pointing to the same case uh, by asking their ID or phone number or something.
Okay, so that can help you to resolve where exactly the ambulance need to be sent. Do you remember reading that the system actually collapsed when there was not precise input of the latitude and longitude in the dispatch system?
We have we haven't.
Yeah, so when the system was not given the exact, location, it was not able to work properly. It was not able to estimate, the area of that particular location. So if and that is because of that, the system really broke down when the input was not very precise. So whenever you are trying to create something, always remember this aspect of defensive programming, especially when you are dealing with unstructured input, especially when it comes to natural language processing. And people make maybe they are trying to write apple as an input, but the spelling is absolutely incorrect. So how do you deal with such kind of errors, especially in natural language processing and unstructured inputs as the arguments to the function? These aspects becomes really, really important. And so and when you are trying to do that, basically you minimize the bugs that might occur, because your program might still be functioning, but if the logic is not right, then definitely some kind of error will be thrown up. Okay, so defensive programming is quite related to debugging, because defensive programming is directly related to the code quality also. When you are dealing with all kind of worst case inputs that can be given to a function in your own projects also, try to try not to be too optimistic of the fact that the user will enter the exact input that your function needs. Keep that space, hold that space of uncertainty for your function. And that, thinking of that and not assuming a perfect input, that might help you to process your software better. And that is why you must have seen we have alert systems or error systems, so that before we actually process the input data, the user can be informed beforehand that the given input provided is not suitable to be taken forward as an input to the function that will process it and later provide the output. So whenever you are programming, always think of the you know worst case scenario and don't expect perfect inputs, because that shows how much in depth you are thinking about what you're creating. And in the long term, this kind of way will definitely help you in obtaining lesser bugs. This is also sometimes called as a conservative approach, wherein you are assuming that there can be other scenarios which you have not, which you might not readily expect, and you program or code accordingly. So this is something that you need to remember. And lastly, as a matter of attitude, programmers would do good if they do not feel too much proud when they fix bugs, but rather embarrassed, especially when we are working on our own codes, about the fact that their code has bugs. So the glory lies not so much in being able to fix bugs quickly. Of course, for others' code maybe, but when it comes to your own code, you must be more focused on moving towards a bug-free code. So, and I always say moving towards a bug-free code, because it is not ideally possible to have no bug in the code. But your entire software can be good enough, but it may take some more time and more perfection to go towards a perfect code. So, in your coding approach also, while you're developing a software, developing certain modules, I understand the intention can be so much on providing the functionality that we might not pay heed to the quality of code we are writing, especially from robustness point of view. And so this is very important to remember. And so lastly, with that, we sort of wind up our elementary understanding of debugging. I would say elementary because there's so much more that needs to be explored in the realm of debugging. But aside from all the concepts, I think practice is what really makes us better debuggers. And for that, I will hold release some questions also in the lab sessions so that you can hands-on work on identifying the bugs. So to summarize, debugging is a learned skill. None of us evolved to be debuggers, and it is definitely not hard to learn. It's largely transferable, as in if you learn how to critically think, then debugging is not something that will only be applicable to computer science. And ultimately, the aim is to move towards a bug-free code. So with that, we come to end of our debugging lecture. Are there any questions? Okay, so do you want me to release the questions of practice on debugging now only, or should I wait for the lab session? What do you guys suggest? Like now means after the class, or should I give you time to practice them in the lab session?
Until when we need to do that, complete that.
I think in the lab it would be better because you can then devote dedicatedly those 2 hours for the debugging. There is no specific deadline when you need to submit, but I think working on few more complicated problems or not so complicated would really help. Don't worry, the program is in C, and I might also search for something in Python. So you will try to understand, debugging more from that. But for now, I think remember, use of print statements is important. Understanding your code flow is very important. Understanding the error is important. And uh, I think the takeaway should be that you, even if you're moving in a particular space, do not just fumble around. Have a very, systematic approach to debugging your system, and try to understand what you're doing. So that is all from my side today. Tomorrow we meet for the lab. We will continue working on, your class diagrams. Important thing is that in class diagrams, it is a good opportunity to revise your OOPS concepts. Because you're literally designing your system. So that way, it's a good exercise for you to understand how different, you know, uh, concepts in the OOPS get played when you're designing your software. So tomorrow we will continue with that, and from next week I will be taking on software testing, multiple types of testing, and how good testing and bad testing are different from each other. And we will be talking about unit testing, integration testing, system testing, alpha testing, beta testing, and I will also show you an example of unit testing in Java. Because I'm not sure if you already know, but sometimes in program and in software, programs are also written for testing it automatically. So most of the unit testing and integration is highly automated because there are codes that are written in software itself to perform even the testing. Sometimes they can be done manually, but for especially large softwares, the testing modules are literally integrated into the software, and they keep on running every time a new code is sort of inducted in the code base. So in next week we will be talking about software testing, and since we have come to finish our topic on debugging, I think now we can decide on the date for the quiz. Any suggestions? What would be the good date for the last quiz for software engineering in the next week?
They're not sure, ma'am. Pushkar will contact you about
Okay,
this.
so most probably I will take it on Thursday.
And also, what about the presentations of
Yes, yes,
when are you planning to take them?
yes. So when is your semester ending?
Uh, I'm not sure, ma'am. HCMM said that October 30th would be the last working day, but we got something that the B2B presentations would be from 10 to 14, so we are not too sure about it.
So next week is software testing, and that would be our last topic in software engineering. Okay, and in this weekend only, I will release the questions that you need to answer in your final presentation, so that you can start making your presentation. And so I think today, what is the date today?
It's 7 October.
So okay, just a second. I can see some comments. Uh,
Are we going to learn about some debugger or something?
Debugger.
Yes, ma'am.